Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work in an office where most people are pretty decent, but there was this one guy who made everyone's life miserable. He had this terrible habit of making himself look good by throwing other people under the bus during meetings. It didn't matter if you did great work or met all your deadlines. He would always find some way to twist things around and make it seem like he was the only competent person in the department. I'm naturally a quiet person who prefers to just focus on my work without getting involved in office drama. Maybe that made me look like an easy target to him. When I first transferred to his department about 6 months ago, I noticed right away that he had this pattern of taking credit for team projects and pointing fingers whenever anything went wrong. At first, I thought maybe I was being paranoid. But then I started paying closer attention during our weekly meetings. He would interrupt people when they were explaining their progress just so he could add his own commentary that somehow always made him sound essential to everything. When someone mentioned a challenge they were facing, he would jump in with suggestions that made it sound like he was the one solving everyone's problems. The worst part was how he would phrase things. He never directly told someone they messed up. Instead, he would use this fake concerned tone and say he was worried about timelines or suggest that maybe we should double-check quality standards. It was passive-aggressive manipulation at its finest. I watched him do this to at least 3 other people before he started targeting me. One co-worker ended up getting written up because he convinced management that she wasn't communicating effectively about her project status. Another guy actually requested a transfer to a different department just to get away from the toxic environment this behavior was creating. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine project update meeting. We were going around the table discussing the status of various deliverables for a client presentation that was scheduled for the following week. I had been working on a comprehensive data analysis that was pretty crucial to the whole presentation. The work itself was complex and required pulling information from multiple databases and creating visualizations that would make sense to people who weren't familiar with our technical processes. I had actually finished my part early and was feeling pretty good about the quality of what I had put together. The analysis was thorough, the charts were clean and easy to read, and I had even included some additional insights that I thought would be valuable for the client meeting. When it was my turn to give my update, I started explaining that my analysis was complete and ready for review. Before I could even finish describing what I had accomplished, he jumped in with that familiar fake, concerned expression on his face. He told everyone that he hated to bring something up in front of the whole group, but there was an elephant in the room that needed to be addressed. The whole conference room went quiet. Our manager looked up from her notes with a confused expression and asked what elephant he was talking about. He explained that the deadline for my data analysis had actually been yesterday. He said he had been waiting for those files so he could incorporate them into his summary report, but he still hadn't received them. He claimed he was concerned about how this delay might impact the timeline for the client presentation. I felt my stomach drop, not because I had actually missed the deadline, but because I realized what he was doing. He was setting me up to look unreliable in front of our manager and the rest of the team. He continued by saying he didn't want to throw anyone under the bus, but when team members don't communicate about delays or miss important deadlines, it puts the whole project at risk. He suggested that maybe we needed to talk about better project management practices. Several people around the table were nodding, like what he was saying made perfect sense. Our manager was writing something down in her notebook, which was never a good sign. She asked me directly if what he was saying was accurate and whether the deadline had actually been yesterday. I could have gotten defensive, I could have argued or made excuses or tried to explain the situation. Instead, I just stayed calm and reached for my laptop. I told everyone that I wanted to show them something. I connected my laptop to the conference room display and opened my email. Then I navigated to the message thread about this specific project. The emails were all time-stamped and showed the complete communication history. I pointed to the original project timeline that had been sent out 3 weeks earlier. Everyone could see that my deadline was listed as today, not yesterday. Then I scrolled down to show the email I had received 2 nights ago with the updated data files that I needed to complete my analysis. The room was dead silent while everyone read the timestamp on the email. It showed that he had sent me the files at 11:47 p.m., less than 12 hours before he was now claiming I had missed the deadline. I explained that these files had come from his work email and had arrived well after normal business hours on one night. My analysis required this data to be accurate, so I couldn't complete the work until I received these files. I switched to another email that showed my response confirming receipt and letting him know I would have the analysis ready by today's meeting, which was always the original deadline. The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone was staring at the screen, reading the evidence that completely contradicted everything he had just said. His face had gone pale, and he was fidgeting with his pen like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Our manager looked directly at him with an expression I had never seen before. She asked him how he could send the required files at midnight the day before claiming the deadline was missed, and then suggest that somehow made me unreliable. He stammered something about there being confusion about the timeline, but his voice was shaky and unconvincing. Our manager told him that the confusion seemed to be coming from him. She pointed out that, according to the emails, not only had he provided the necessary materials late, but he was now misrepresenting the actual deadline and trying to make it sound like someone else had dropped the ball. The meeting wrapped up pretty quickly after that. He didn't say another word for the rest of the session, and people were definitely giving him some looks while we all packed up our materials. About an hour later, I got an email from our manager asking me to send her copies of the email thread for her records. Apparently, she wanted to document the situation properly. Word spread pretty fast through the office about what had happened. It's hard to keep something like that quiet when it happens in front of 8 people in a conference room. By the end of the week, his little game of throwing people under the bus had basically stopped working because everyone knew to keep their receipts ready. The result was watching him try to backtrack and be overly friendly with people he had previously tried to sabotage. But the damage was done. Nobody trusted his version of events anymore, and his credibility was shot. He never tried that manipulation tactic with me again. In fact, he barely spoke to me unless it was absolutely necessary for work, which honestly made my job a lot more pleasant. Having documented proof ready when someone tries to lie about you can completely turn the tables on them. I met my best friend during our first year of college when we ended up as roommates in the dorms. We bonded immediately over late-night study sessions and our shared love of terrible reality television shows. After graduation, we both moved to different cities for work but made sure to stay in close contact. We had this tradition of taking at least one big trip together every year to catch up and have adventures. Last March, I got a text from 2 friends of mine who are married. They live about 14 hours away by car in a city we had always wanted to visit. The couple told me they were planning this huge event at their house in October and wanted to invite me, my best friend, and another mutual friend to come stay with them. The husband reached out saying they were throwing this amazing party and really wanted us to come. He insisted we should stay at their place instead of getting a hotel. I told him that sounded fun, but mentioned that my best friend and I were actually thinking about getting a hotel room. The wife jumped in and said no way, explaining they had plenty of space and it would be so much more fun if we stayed with them. She really insisted on it. My best friend and I talked it over for weeks. We're both the type of people who really value our sleep and comfort, especially after long trips. I told my best friend I really thought we should just book a hotel because I get cranky when I don't sleep well. She agreed and said she felt the same way. Plus, we didn't want to impose on them or feel like we had to be on all the time as house guests. But the married couple kept insisting every time we brought up hotels. The husband told us not to waste our money on a hotel because they had it covered and really wanted us there. The wife said it would be like a big sleepover and kept talking about how much more personal and fun it would be. They seemed genuinely excited about hosting us and kept mentioning how much space they had. After going back and forth for weeks, we finally gave in and agreed to stay at their house. My best friend and I planned our route carefully since it was such a long drive. We left early Friday morning and took turns driving to make sure we'd arrive safely. The drive took us through some beautiful countryside, but by the time we pulled into their driveway that evening, we were exhausted. The host greeted us and gave us a quick tour of their house. Everything looked normal until they showed us where we'd be sleeping. The wife told us this was where we'd be staying and said they had set up the guest room just for us. I looked around the small room and felt my heart sink. There was an air mattress on the floor that looked like it had seen better days, and a futon that was clearly just thrown on top of some kind of metal bed frame. I tried to sound grateful and thanked them for setting everything up, but inside I was already dreading the night ahead. The air mattress looked deflated, and when I pressed on the futon, it felt like there was basically no padding between the thin mattress and the hard metal slats underneath. Our other mutual friend arrived shortly after us and seemed just as surprised by the sleeping arrangements. That first night was absolutely horrible. I ended up sharing the futon with our mutual friend, and it felt like we were lying directly on metal bars. Every time one of us moved, the whole thing would creak and shift. My best friend later told me the air mattress was even worse. It was so deflated that she could feel the hard floor through it all night. None of us got more than a couple hours of sleep. By morning, we were all in serious pain. My best friend said her back was absolutely killing her, and she thought she slept on the floor more than the air mattress. Our mutual friend said she could barely move her neck because those metal things were digging into her spine all night. I told them I felt like I got hit by a truck, and this wasn't sustainable for 3 more nights. We tried to be polite about it during breakfast, but we were clearly all miserable. The hosts seemed oblivious to our discomfort and were already talking about the next day's activities. My best friend and I exchanged looks and knew we had to make a change. We found a quiet moment to discuss our options. My best friend said she couldn't do 2 more nights of this or she'd be in physical therapy for weeks. I agreed and said I felt terrible about it, but we had warned them we valued comfort and wanted a hotel originally. She pointed out that they had insisted we stay there even when we tried to book our own accommodations. We decided to book a hotel room for the remaining nights. There was a nice place just 10 minutes away that had great reviews and comfortable beds. That afternoon we approached our hosts to break the news. I told them we really appreciated them having us stay, but we were going to book a hotel for the rest of the trip. The wife immediately asked what happened and why we wanted to leave. My best friend explained that the sleeping arrangements were really uncomfortable and we didn't get any sleep the night before. She mentioned we were both in a lot of pain. The husband seemed frustrated and said they had set up the whole guest room for us. He asked if we couldn't just tough it out for a couple more nights. I reminded them that we had mentioned wanting a hotel originally because we needed proper sleep. I pointed out that they had convinced us to stay there instead. The wife said they just thought that it would be more fun and personal that way. She complained that hotels were so impersonal and expensive. My best friend said we understood that and were grateful for the thought. But she explained we couldn't physically handle sleeping on those surfaces for 3 more nights. The hosts were clearly disappointed and seemed to take it as some kind of personal rejection. But we had already made the hotel reservation and were honestly looking forward to getting actual rest. The husband said this really put a damper on the whole weekend they planned. I assured him the event was still going to be great and we'd be there for all the activities, just sleeping elsewhere. The hotel room was absolutely perfect. Comfortable beds, good pillows, and we both slept like babies that second night. We enjoyed the rest of the weekend activities, but there was definitely some tension with our hosts. They kept making little comments about how we had abandoned them and how the guest room felt empty and unused after they put so much effort into setting it up. The wife mentioned it was sad that we couldn't appreciate what they tried to do for us. The final morning, when we were packing up to leave, the hosts made one last guilt trip attempt. The husband said they were really hurt that their hospitality wasn't good enough for us. My best friend told him it wasn't about their hospitality. She said they were wonderful hosts, and the event was amazing, but we just needed proper sleep to enjoy everything fully. I reminded them we had told them from the beginning that we wanted to book a hotel because comfort was important to us. I explained they had convinced us otherwise, but the accommodations just weren't suitable. The wife said they thought we were just being picky. She mentioned they sleep on that futon sometimes when they have other guests, and it's fine for them. Our mutual friend finally spoke up and said she actually agreed with us. She told them she barely slept either night and was going to need a massage when she got home. That seemed to finally drive the point home. The host realized that all three of their guests had the same experience, and it wasn't just us being difficult. We left on relatively good terms, but I could tell they were still bothered by the whole situation. I was exhausted after 3 months of sleepless nights with my newborn son. The pregnancy had been rough, with 2 months of bed rest toward the end. The doctors warned me about complications, but delivery went smoothly. Being a new mom felt overwhelming, so I tried getting out more to fight the cabin fever from being stuck indoors. That afternoon, I decided to take my little one to the small community park near our apartment. It had a playground and walking paths. Nothing fancy, but it stayed peaceful during weekday afternoons. I figured fresh air would help both of us, and I needed vitamin D after being cooped up so long. I pushed the stroller along one of the quieter paths, watching my son sleep peacefully. He looked content, wrapped in his light blue blanket with tiny fists curled near his face. I stopped near a bench to adjust his blanket when a woman approached us. She looked about 50, wearing a floral dress and carrying an oversized purse. At first, she seemed harmless, just another person enjoying the park. But something about how she stared at my baby made me uncomfortable. She gushed about how beautiful my baby was and asked his age. I told her he was 3 months old, keeping my response brief and hoping she'd move along. Instead, she moved closer to the stroller, leaning down for a better look at my son. She went on about how precious he was and said she bet he smelled like heaven. Then she said something that sent chills down my spine. She told me she used to have babies just like him. The way she said it felt odd and unsettling. I positioned myself between her and the stroller. I told her that was nice, but we should head home now. I started pushing the stroller away, but she followed alongside me, still staring at my baby. She asked me to wait and said she just wanted to hold him for a minute. She promised to be careful and mentioned raising 4 children of her own. I told her I appreciated her interest, but don't let strangers hold my baby. Her expression changed from friendly to annoyed. The smile disappeared and her voice became sharp. She argued that she wasn't a stranger and that she was a grandmother. She claimed to know how to handle babies better than I probably did. She said I looked barely old enough to have children. I was 26 and definitely old enough to be a mother, but I wasn't getting into an argument. I quickened my pace, hoping to create distance between us. I told her to please leave us alone, but she didn't leave us alone. She continued following us, becoming more agitated with each step. She started lecturing me about how young mothers today think they know everything. She went on about how, back in her day, they shared babies with the community. She said they understood that it takes a village to raise a child. I repeated that I had said no and asked her to stop following us. Other park visitors started noticing the commotion. A jogger slowed down as he passed us, sensing tension. An elderly couple on a nearby bench stopped their conversation to watch. She announced that if I wouldn't let her hold him properly, she'd just take a quick picture. She pulled out her phone and started taking photos of my baby before I could react. I immediately moved to block her view and demanded she stop taking pictures of my child. She argued that it was a public park and she could take pictures of whatever she wanted. I was getting scared now. This woman was clearly not rational, and her behavior was escalating rapidly. I pulled out my phone ready to call for help if necessary. That's when she made her move. While I was distracted with my phone, she lunged forward and grabbed the stroller handle, trying to pull it away from me. She declared that if I wouldn't share him willingly, she'd just have to take him herself. She claimed this baby needed someone who knew how to care for him properly. My maternal instincts kicked in immediately. Without thinking, I dropped my phone and grabbed her wrists, trying to pry her hands off the stroller handle. I screamed for her to let go of my baby and called out for help. She was surprisingly strong for her age, and for a terrifying moment, I thought she might succeed in taking my son. The stroller rocked back and forth as we struggled, and I could hear my baby starting to cry. The sound of my child's distressed cries filled me with rage I didn't know I possessed. This woman was threatening my baby, and every fiber of my being screamed at me to protect him. Without planning it, I drew back my fist and punched her square in the face as hard as I could. The impact sent a shock up my arm, but I didn't care. The sound was sickening, but I was beyond caring about anything except getting this woman away from my child. She immediately released the stroller and stumbled backward, blood streaming from her nose. She looked shocked, as if she couldn't believe someone had actually fought back. She cried out that I had hit her and seemed genuinely surprised. I told her I'd hit her again if she didn't get away from my baby right now. She took another step back, holding her nose and looking around for support from other park visitors. Instead of sympathy, she found several people approaching us, having witnessed her attempt to take my child. The jogger who had noticed us earlier told me he saw everything and that this lady tried to steal my baby. He asked if he should call the police. An elderly man announced he got it all on video and she was definitely trying to take the stroller. Her face went pale when she realized multiple people had witnessed her actions. She looked around desperately, hoping someone would take her side, but everyone was supporting me. She protested that this was ridiculous, and she was just trying to help. She claimed young mothers these days don't know how to handle children properly. The elderly woman from the bench told her what she had done was attempted kidnapping and that it was a serious crime. Someone had already called 911, and we could hear sirens in the distance. The woman seemed to realize the gravity of her situation and started backing away from the group. She insisted this was all a misunderstanding and she never intended to actually take the baby. She claimed she was just trying to teach me a lesson about sharing. I pointed out that she had grabbed my stroller and said she was taking my baby. That was kidnapping, not teaching. When police arrived, they quickly took statements from everyone who witnessed the incident. The elderly man showed them his video, which clearly captured the woman attempting to pull the stroller away from me and declaring her intention to take my baby. Officers arrested her on the spot for attempted kidnapping and child endangerment. When they led her away in handcuffs, she was still protesting her innocence and claiming she was just trying to help. One officer told me I had done exactly the right thing protecting my child, and not to feel bad about defending him. I pressed charges, and the woman ended up pleading guilty to attempted kidnapping. She received 2 years of probation and was ordered to stay away from all public parks in the area. I needed a part-time job to help pay for college, so 6 months ago I started at this small family-owned cafe. The place was cozy with about 15 tables and a counter that served coffee, sandwiches, pastries, and soft-serve ice cream. Our ice cream machine had 3 dispensers. The left one served vanilla, the right one chocolate, and the middle one could swirl both flavors together. Most customers loved our soft serve because we kept it at the perfect temperature and consistency. But there was one guy who made ordering ice cream feel like solving a complex math problem. He showed up every Wednesday around 2 p.m. like clockwork. The guy looked to be in his mid-40s with graying hair and always wore the same wrinkled navy polo shirt. He had this permanent scowl that made him look constantly annoyed with the world. He never even looked at our menu board. He walked straight to the counter and only ever ordered soft serve. Here's the thing about this customer. There was always something wrong with his order. Always. The first time I served him, he asked for a medium vanilla cone with rainbow sprinkles. I scooped the vanilla into a cone and added what seemed like a reasonable amount of colorful sprinkles. He took one look at it and told me there were way too many sprinkles covering the ice cream. I counted maybe 25 sprinkles total scattered across the surface. That seemed normal to me, but I apologized and made him a fresh cone with about half as many sprinkles. He examined this new cone and said there weren't nearly enough sprinkles now. I made a third cone trying to find some middle ground. Still not right. It took 4 attempts before I hit the magical sprinkle ratio he demanded. The whole thing lasted about 20 minutes and created a line of increasingly frustrated customers behind him. The following Wednesday brought a new complaint. This time he said his vanilla soft serve was too soft and runny. He wanted it firmer so it would hold its shape better. I explained that our machine was set to the manufacturer's recommended temperature, but he insisted I somehow make it firmer. The week after that, he ordered chocolate and said it was too sweet. Then the next week, the same chocolate flavor wasn't sweet enough. One week, he said the cone itself was stale, even though we got fresh shipments every other day. Another time, he said I filled the cone too full, and it might drip. Then the next visit, I didn't fill it enough and he wasn't getting his money's worth. Each visit guaranteed at least 2 remakes, sometimes 3 or 4. I started dreading Wednesdays and watching the clock around 1:45 p.m. My manager noticed the waste and asked what was happening with all the discarded ice cream every Wednesday. I explained about the difficult customer, but she just shrugged and said customer satisfaction was important. He seemed to enjoy watching us scramble to fix whatever imaginary problem he'd invented that day. He never raised his voice or got openly angry. Instead, he had this calm, condescending tone, like he was explaining something obvious to a small child. My co-worker Jake had just turned 17, and this was his first real job. He started working here to save money for his first car. Jake was the kind of kid who genuinely wanted to make every customer happy. He took pride in getting orders right and would apologize if he made even small mistakes. This made him the perfect target for our Wednesday problem customer. One afternoon in late October, the customer approached the counter with his usual expression of mild irritation. He told Jake he wanted something different today. Instead of just vanilla or just chocolate, he wanted both flavors. Jake's face lit up, probably thinking this would be simpler than the usual nitpicking. He asked cheerfully if the customer wanted the flavors swirled together. The customer nodded and said that sounded perfect. Jake filled a cup with our chocolate vanilla swirl, creating a beautiful spiral pattern of both flavors. The ice cream looked exactly like the pictures we had on our menu board. He handed it over with a proud smile. The customer studied the cup for about 10 seconds, rotating it slowly. Then he said this was completely wrong. He didn't want the flavors mixed together in a swirl pattern like this. Jake apologized right away. He asked how the customer wanted the flavors arranged instead. The customer explained that he wanted both flavors in the same cup, but separated, not swirled together. Jake quickly made a new cup, carefully dispensing chocolate on one side and vanilla on the other. He created a clean line down the middle, with each flavor taking up exactly half the cup. He handed it over, hoping this would finally be correct. The customer examined this cup even more carefully than the first one. After another long pause, he said this was still wrong. He specifically wanted the chocolate on the right side of the cup, not the left side. Poor Jake stared at the round cup in his hands, clearly trying to figure out the logic behind this request. Which side of a circular cup counted as the right side when you were looking at it from above? He rotated the cup several times, his face getting redder with embarrassment. Other customers in line started checking their watches and sighing loudly. Jake finally handed over what he hoped was the correct orientation, but he looked completely defeated. The customer accepted it with a satisfied nod and said this was much better. Jake rang up the order with shaking hands. The customer paid his $3.50 and left without any acknowledgement of the trouble he'd caused. During our break, Jake kept apologizing to me for not understanding the request right away. He said he felt stupid for getting confused about something like which side of a cup was the right side. He worried that he wasn't cut out for customer service work. I tried to reassure him that the customer was being unreasonable, but I could see the experience had shaken his confidence. That's when I decided this nonsense had gone on long enough. I'd watched this guy torment my co-workers and waste our products for months. He clearly got some kind of satisfaction from making teenage employees jump through hoops for his entertainment. I started planning exactly how I would handle him the next time he came in. The following Wednesday arrived, and right on schedule at 2 p.m., the customer walked through our door. He had that same smug expression I'd grown to hate. He approached the counter where I was working and looked me directly in the eye. There was something almost challenging in his look. He ordered vanilla and chocolate soft serve in the same cup, but on separate sides, please. I filled the cup exactly how he'd requested the week before. Vanilla on one side, chocolate on the other, with a clean division down the middle. I slid it across the counter and waited for his inspection. He picked up the cup and examined it with his usual theatrical scrutiny. After a few moments, he looked back up at me with that familiar, condescending expression. He said this wasn't quite right because he specifically wanted the chocolate on the right side of the cup. This was my moment. I've been thinking about this exact scenario all week. I looked him straight in the eye and told him that was absolutely no problem at all. I reached across the counter and picked up his cup. Very deliberately, I rotated it exactly 180 degrees, so the chocolate that had been on the left was now positioned on the right. I set it back down in front of him and maintained eye contact the entire time. I told him that now the chocolate was on the right side exactly how he'd requested. Then I asked with my sweetest customer service smile if there was anything else I could help him with today. The change in his expression was immediate and dramatic. That smug confidence completely evaporated from his face. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He stood there for what felt like a full minute, clearly trying to process what had just happened. For the first time in all the months I'd known him, he had absolutely nothing to complain about. The chocolate was indeed on the right side of the cup, exactly where he demanded it be. He mumbled quietly that no, it was fine now, thank you. His voice was barely audible and he wouldn't make eye contact. He fumbled for his wallet and placed $3.50 on the counter with shaking hands. He grabbed his cup and headed straight for the door without another word. The entire interaction had taken less than 3 minutes, which was probably a record for him. The moment the door closed behind him, Jake burst into laughter from behind the espresso machine. He asked if I'd seen the look on the customer's face. He said the guy looked like his entire worldview had just collapsed. My manager, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway, came over and asked what had happened. I explained my simple cup rotation technique. She shook her head and said she couldn't believe she hadn't thought of that solution herself. I gathered the rest of our team and explained the strategy in detail. I made sure everyone understood that if this customer ever tried the right side complaint again, they should just rotate the cup. We weren't going to waste any more ice cream time or employee confidence on his ridiculous power games. That Wednesday turned out to be the last time I ever saw that customer during any of my shifts. Maybe he decided to find another cafe to terrorize with his impossible demands, or maybe he finally realized that we weren't going to let him push us around anymore. Either way, our Wednesday afternoons became significantly more peaceful and productive. Jake regained his confidence and started enjoying his job again. He even got promoted to shift supervisor 2 months later. Our ice cream waste dropped dramatically and we stopped getting complaints from other customers about long wait times on Wednesdays. My manager started using my story during new employee training. She explained that sometimes difficult customers are just testing boundaries to see how much they can get away with. I keep my emotions to myself most of the time, and people who know me would say I'm pretty reserved. It takes a lot to get me worked up about anything, but there are certain days that matter more than others, and today was one of them. My friend had offered to drive me to the bank since my car was in the shop. I needed to make a deposit before noon, and she said she had errands to run anyway. We got there around 10:30 in the morning and the place was busier than usual for a weekday. The line moved slowly, but I didn't mind. I had plenty on my mind already. Today marked 15 years since my dad passed away. Every May 15th, I make it a point to visit his grave, deposit the money he left me that I've been saving, and spend some quiet time thinking about him. It's become my annual ritual, something that helps me feel connected to him even though he's been gone for so long. When I finally reached the teller window, I pulled out my deposit slip and handed over the cash. The woman behind the counter looked to be in her 40s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and makeup that seemed too done up for 10:30 on one morning. She had this fake professional smile plastered on her face. The teller greeted me with an overly cheerful good morning and asked how she could help me today. I told her I wanted to make a deposit and handed over my paperwork. She took my forms and started typing on her computer. Everything seemed routine until she reached for the date stamp. I watched her press it down on my deposit slip, and that's when I noticed the problem. I politely mentioned that I thought she had the wrong date on the stamp. She looked up at me with this annoyed expression, like I had just questioned her entire existence. In a sharp and dismissive tone, she told me the date was correct and that today was May 14th. I could feel the people behind me in line starting to pay attention to our conversation. I explained that today was actually May 15th and that it was the anniversary of my dad's passing. I wasn't trying to make a scene or embarrass anyone. I just needed the date to be correct on my deposit. This wasn't just any random banking transaction for me. The teller just stared at me for what felt like forever. Her mouth was slightly open, and I could see the color drain from her face. The confident, snippy attitude she had just moments before completely disappeared. All she could manage was a quiet "oh." When the realization hit her, the entire bank had gone quiet. The other customers in line had heard our exchange, and now everyone was just standing there in uncomfortable silence. Even the security guard by the door had stopped his casual pacing and was looking our way. The teller fumbled around her desk looking for a new date stamp. She kept looking up at me with these apologetic eyes, but couldn't seem to find the words to actually apologize. Her professional composure had completely crumbled. She whispered something about getting the right stamp and started rummaging through her drawer. She called over to another teller station and asked in a shaky voice if they had the stamp for today's date. The other teller, a younger guy who had been watching our interaction, quickly handed over the correct stamp. The blonde woman took it with trembling hands and carefully applied it to my deposit slip, making sure to press it down evenly. I thanked her quietly. She processed the rest of my deposit in complete silence. No more fake cheerful banter, no more attitude. She printed out my receipt and slid it across the counter to me, like she was afraid I might bite her hand. When I turned to leave, I could hear whispers starting up behind me in line. The other customers were clearly talking about what had just happened. Some lady near the back of the line was shaking her head and making comments about customer service training. My friend was waiting by the entrance, and she could tell something had happened just by looking at my face. She asked if everything was okay, and I told her it was just a misunderstanding about the date. We walked to the car in silence. She knew me well enough to understand that I didn't want to talk about it right then. When we drove away, I looked back at the bank and saw the blonde teller through the window. She was talking to what looked like a manager, probably explaining what had happened. Later that evening, my friend called to check on me. She said she had been thinking about what happened at the bank and that the teller was really out of line was how she spoke to me. I told her it was fine and that the teller had realized her mistake. My friend insisted that the way the woman snapped at me before she knew the truth wasn't okay. She pointed out that I was just trying to get the right date on my deposit. She was right, of course. The teller's initial response had been unnecessarily rude, but seeing how mortified she became when she realized what day it actually was and why it mattered to me felt like enough of a lesson. I spent the rest of that day at the cemetery just like I do every year. Sitting by my dad's grave, I told him about the banking incident and how awkward it had been. I think he would have found the whole thing pretty amusing, knowing him. The date stamp situation got sorted out, my deposit went through properly, and life moved on. But I imagine that teller will double-check her date stamps for a while after that interaction. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.